What are the traditions that Belarusian oppositionists draw upon, or do they make them up? What models do they use, and is this merely a copycat form of the Western way? The language of civilization used to be Polish or Russian. Is it English today? Belarus has a complex history, and its future may be equally as complex. Join me, Jan Darasz, for How We Got Here.
The Belarusian identity has long been an intricate tapestry woven from different historical, cultural and geopolitical influences. The country has been shaped by centuries of shifting borders, invasions and occupations, which ultimately left the Belarusian people struggling to determine what their national identity is. The Belarusian language is a central part of the country's identity, a symbol of its cultural heritage. It is also what differentiates Belarus from its neighboring Slavic countries. Despite efforts to suppress the Belarusian language during periods of harsh Russification, the people of Belarus refused to give up on their native language, cultivating it in plays and songs. Other pillars of Belarusian identity are the country's folklore, traditions and customs. They are what ties modern Belarusians to their roots and heritage. From the colorful costumes to the haunting melodies of folk music, these cultural expressions embody the essence of Belarusian identity and serve as a source of unity for the people of Belarus. However, the true essence of Belarusian national identity transcends language and culture. It lies in the collective aspirations of its people for freedom, democracy and self-determination. It is this determination that fuels Belarusian opposition movements abroad. The Belarusian people have shown remarkable courage and determination in their quest for a free Belarus, often at the cost of their personal liberty. Anti-regime actors and musicians say that the rediscovery and assertion of true Belarusian national identity are powerful tools for challenging the Lukashenko regime. That's also why the Belarusian dictator is hell-bent on adopting Russian traditions and silencing all those who oppose him. As the struggle for democracy in Belarus continues, the true Belarusian national identity stands as a beacon of hope and resilience. And despite the challenges and obstacles that lie ahead, the spirit of the Belarusian people cannot be extinguished, and their quest for freedom and justice will ultimately prevail.
I'm delighted to welcome today our guest, Pawel Usau, a political scientist here at the University of Warsaw. So welcome to the programme.
Thank you.
Great to have you. Before we branch out into a historical discussion on the Belarus identity, can you describe to us briefly what you mean by this neo-totalitarianism that you've written about in your papers?
So it's a quite new definition related to the process of transformation Russian and Belarusian political regimes, Putin's and Lukashenko regime, from authoritarian rule to almost totalitarian rule, with elements of modern regime, with using internet, with mixture of economy, but with traditional mechanism and instrument of political control and repressions. Actually, speaking about Belarus, since 2022, Lukashenko used mass repressions as a central important mechanism of keeping power in Belarus. Due to this repression, many people today are in prison. Around 4,000 people who committed political crime against political regime, convinced on political article, are in prison. Personally, me, also I am convicted in participation in upheaval in Belarus, and probably during next week there will be the special courts, and some kind of sentence will be announced, and it will be 12 years of imprisoning because of my political activity. And many people like me are condemned and sentenced to the long terms of prisoning, in spite of the fact that they are abroad. So that is why political regime used different methods of political repressions, psychological, moral, physical repression, and due to this system repression, because repression became a central political institute of the governing, ideological repression, political, moral repressions, many people had to run away from Belarus. Around 100,000 people for that moment are already abroad.
Are there any, is it kind of, okay, so modern Belarus is internet plus repression. I mean, that's what it seems to be like.
Yeah, but also we should take into the consideration that internet use also as an element of propaganda and manipulation.
Yes.
Especially for that moment, Russian and Belarusian authority used Chinese methods and technique for keeping control over internet and using internet as a method of propaganda. In spite of the fact, of course, that for today's authoritarian and totalitarian regime, it's a huge challenge to cut off from influence of the alternative information, because Belarus is still a European country, and it is a huge challenge and problem for the regime, because influence of Europe is too high, and for that moment Belarus at least are not able to isolate itself from the Western world.
I mean, you're a Belarusian emigre, you're part of this 100,000 emigration, the great emigration, the parallels with the emigration of Poland and Lithuania after the uprising in Russia seem accurate. You behave like the conscience of a Belarusian nation. What are the actual? Is that an example that is an accurate example?
So we could compare it with this process you mentioned, that Belarusian and the Russian authority use the pressure and the process of pushing out people from the country as an element of purgings. Yes, like it was during a well-known uprising during the Russian Empire in 19th century, like it was in 20th century. This huge emigration of intelligence from the Russia when Bolsheviks took power in Russia and used the element of elimination of intelligentsia. In all Soviet republic, and Belarus suffered very much from this repression. In 1914, during the one day, 100 poets, representative of Belarusian intelligentsia, had been shot during one night, and Russian Soviet authority just destroyed the spirit of Belarusian national intelligentsia, and those representatives who created Belarus Popular Republic in 1918.
The intelligentsia here is the kind of motor of national consciousness. What models does it use, or what models has it used? Is it the Polish-Lithuanian Commonwealth model, and then did it leapfrog that early modern period and go to a medieval past to rediscover its Belarusian consciousness? What was the process, end of 19th century, 20th century, about forming a new nation?
In beginning of the 20th century and the end of the 20th century, the core of national idea and national conscience, it was great Duchess of Lithuania, and also later the Rzeczpospolite. It's common history, common tradition, political tradition, because we could criticize the elements of the government in Rzeczpospolite, but it was proto-democracy, and it was strongly different that it was in Russia. And for population of old Belarus territory, Moscow and Russia was an enemy. Unfortunately, during the process of Russification and Sovietization, these historical elements of statehood was diversed. The new identity was created that Belarusians, it's a part of a great Russian people. So we should
poorer cousins to
and Poland conquered Belarus and was a process of Catholicisation and elimination of Belarus national history, but especially at the end of the 20th century, when Belarus rebuilt its independence in 1991, we were able to come back to our roots. So we restore our national symbols, our national flags, and for that moment the national symbol of protest and the new Belarus is a white, red-white flag, and the shield with pogoń, with knights who fights with Moscow occupants and so on. And another element, and very strong element of restoring national identity, it's national language, Belarusian language, which is also under repression now, under the cultural repression now in Belarus.
But is that a language of the country, the language of the peasant, rather than of the language of the nobility? When you talk about the Belarusian language,
old Belarusian language, it was a language of nobility, and main historical documents had been written on old Belarusian language. It's so-called Statute of Great Duchess of Lithuania, which was written in 16th century, and it was written in old Belarusian language. It is our central document, historical and cultural documents, and in different arguing we could prove that we have own language. It was political language, it was the language of nobility, the language of political elite, of course.
But was it the language of culture or literature?
Yes, and Francisca Rina, who lived in 16th century, also popularized, and this language, some people says that old Belarusian language was very close to the Russian language. It's a mistake. Belarusian and Moscow language, because there wasn't Russia at that time. It was a Moscow state. It was a huge difference, and for example, many documents prove that Belarusians or inhabitants of the territory of Belarus called themselves Rusians, and called those who lives in Moscow Moscovites. It was a huge difference, cultural, political, and mental difference between a population of these two territories.
Russian and Ruthenia are very confused in the West. It's all Russia somehow. You're, as an intellectual, as an intellectual class, you're looking towards Europe for your model. What particular Europe are you looking at? Are you looking at the West as it is, or an idealized West as you think it should be?
So we, for that moment, look at the West from pragmatical point of view. The Western civilization proved its success in economy, in culture, in development of the society, especially when we look at those countries who were in so-called communistic camp, socialistic camp. Poland, Lithuania, Romania, Czech Republic, Slovak Republic, they developed, they received a huge opportunity for development. Look at the Poland for that moment. I remember how Poland looked like 20 years ago before joining to the European Union, and to which level it's developed now. Sometimes I used to say that Poland is more European than some European countries from the old Europe.
Well, yes, I mean, we have to unfortunately end the discussion, but Pawel Usau, thank you very much for coming on to our programme.
Thank you.
Join me next time for How We Got Here.